just seeing the parents over there and coming up and breaking down, it was a lot. So you just don't think this happens in your area, and I just feel so badly for those people that were injured, and I just really hope that I'm thankful that the situation's under control, but just really heartbreaking situation.
Just some reaction from this area in Burn Hills, Nashville, just outside of Nashville, suburban area, beautiful place where people raise their families and go to the Covenant Church where this shooting, horrific shooting, happened earlier today. And police say that the shooter, they believe, was a 28-year-old white woman who lived in the area. We understand that there are armored vehicles now doing investigation at her home. She's alleged to have shot 3 young children. This school has children from ages 3 to 12, and also 3 adults at this grade school, as I said, just outside of Nashville. We do expect that we're going to get an update. We're waiting for a picture of this shooter so that we can start to get a better sense. They did tell us they believe she attended this school when she was younger. We don't know if she has more recent connections to the school. We're waiting for more information on all of that. So we heard earlier that the president wanted to speak about this story, about this breaking news today. But when he came out to speak, and we cut away to it because we were waiting to hear what the president would say about it, it was a small business event, but we were told he wanted to address the horrific shooting of 3 young children and 3 adults. But when he came to the podium, this is what he said. Watch.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband. And I ate Jenny's ice cream, chocolate chip. I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs.
Okay. Joining me now from New Hampshire, the former 2-term governor of New Jersey, Christie. Governor, we all kind of looked away from what we were doing, turned to watch what the president was going to say in this moment, and I got to say, it was very disconcerting. It was very strange. What was your reaction when you watched that?
Well, I mean, to say that he misunderstood the moment would be an understatement. The president is watching, you would hope, before he comes down there, the awful scenes from this shooting and the reactions of family members and friends of people in that school, and to be coming down to joking about the fact that he's Jill Biden's husband and was looking for chocolate chip ice cream is hardly the way to start it. There's no way to talk about something like this except to say that for all of us who are parents, what we dread every day is news about the health and life of our children. And so there's no room to joke in that circumstance at all, and certainly not from the President of the United States.
He did then get around to mentioning this, and I understand that his wife, the First Lady, was speaking at a different event, and she also did address it. This is what he said when he talked about what happened in Nashville.
In this situation, reportedly had 2 assault weapons and a pistol, 2 AK-47. So I call on Congress again to pass my assault weapons ban. It's about time that we began to make some more progress, but there's more to learn. But I just wanted to send my concern and hearts out to so many parents.
What do you make of that part of what he said today, Governor?
Well, look, it's not about playing politics, and unfortunately, the second worst thing to do after making a joke on a day like today is to play politics with it. And unfortunately, that's exactly what the president did. Went back to the old playbook. Martha, look, I was a prosecutor for 7 years as the United States Attorney in New Jersey. There is no lack of laws on the books to help us deal with gun violence. We need to enforce those laws strictly, and they should be. We need to look at school safety and dealing much more aggressively with having people at schools who can protect the children and the teachers and administrators who are at those schools. And last but certainly not least, we have to continue to look at the mental health problems in this country. We continue to treat them and stigmatize them in a way that makes people not want to come forward when they have these mental health issues. We need to make it a welcoming circumstance for people to come forward and to be treated. Now, we don't know the exact circumstances of this woman today who did this, but I'm willing to guarantee you that this is a woman who has some serious mental health issues, because nobody in their right mind goes into a school and kills 3 young children and 3 adults who are helping to teach those children.
You know, there's a lot of this always provokes a lot of discussion. I think there's a tremendous amount of frustration that it doesn't go anywhere. People have very different ideas about what the solutions are to this, Governor. But I think the one thing that everyone can agree on, and we're seeing it in these latest polls that we got from the Wall Street Journal and ROC, is that there's something that has dramatically changed in the country, that people are less interested in marriage, they're less interested in tolerance, they're less interested in faith. And you are considering potentially running again. You ran in 2015-16, and that's one of the reasons that you're up there in New Hampshire testing the waters. What would you say is the problem that we need to address in this country, all of us on all sides of the aisle, and what you think would even begin to do that at this point?
Well, look, Martha, I think one of the biggest things we have a problem with this country now is anger, and uncontrollable anger. Now, look, there are plenty of things, I'm from New Jersey. There are plenty of things in our state that make me angry, but you need to learn to control that anger and deal with it, and to try to channel that anger in a way that's positive, that tries to produce something. And quite frankly, I think the political world and the media world stoke the anger rather than try to push us towards conversations that can be productive to try to solve some of these problems. And I think the anger that is so prevalent right now in our country, and stoked by so many different elements of what are supposed to be leadership in our country, create an even bigger problem. And what we don't understand is that some people can't control that anger. And once you light that fuse, you can't stop it from blowing. And that's what we need to be working on first and foremost. This is a country that needs to channel its anger back into productive solutions to problems in this country, and not just have every day people in the political world and the media world stoking that anger and making it worse. Yeah,
I think it's a fair assessment. Patriotism is also on the steep decline over the last 20 years. Quick thought on that before I let you go, sir.
Look, Martha, I think it's very important for us to once again, from the time our children are young, to be talking to them about the greatness of this country and what an amazing place it is. And we haven't had that. We have people who are every day in our educational system in particular are tearing this country down. Now, it's not that we don't have problems that we need to deal with. I just talked about that. There are plenty of problems to deal with, but there is no better place in the world to try to solve those problems in a free way and to build consensus than the United States of America. And we need to start talking that way again, in a way that's hopeful and optimistic, and stop having people in public life in particular who continue to just stoke anger upon anger and fear upon fear that doesn't get us there.
Okay. Governor, thank you. I hope you'll come back. We can talk more about 2024 and what your intentions are there. It's good to see you today. Thank you very much. Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey.
Thanks for having me, Martha.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.